Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have an amazing guest. I have Heather Venenga joining me. Heather, how are you?
Good. Hello. How are you?
Good. I have been looking forward to this interview. I am going to get straight to the point, guys. You're in for a treat. Heather
you're
is
so
the
kind.
author of this amazing book, Protect Your Pack in Your Den, Steps to Successful Farm Succession Planning. I read it, and if you guys can see, it's all tabbed up. It's that good. So I was thrilled, Heather, when I reached out and you said that you were happy to be on the show. So welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Okay, you are the owner of American Harvest Financial. You're a financial advisor. You live in Watertown, South Dakota, if I'm correct.
I do. Yep.
Fantastic. So would you tell us a little bit about your backstory? And mainly, I want to set the scenario when you're talking about that. Why this book? There's always, especially, right? We, as professionals, we have our through line, but when you go so far to write a book, there's always a burning need or a message. Yeah. So can you share your background and your story?
Yeah. And I'll take a little minute because I think it's important to know where people come from, right? And what drives people to do what they do. And I had worked in corporate America for most of my life, about 17 years. And there was a moment that happened and my husband and I decided we needed to make a change. And I was on the road all the time. And so we were going to figure out what we were going to do. We were 40 years old. And a couple days later, he came to me and he says, I'd like to move home to farm. And we were in Kansas at the time. And I'm like, that's a change. That's a change. We had talked about it. And I think some of our listeners here are going to relate to this. Like, it just wasn't ever the right time to leave what I viewed as secure corporate America. Like we had gotten deep enough into corporate America that it was too tough to leave that to come home and farm. Like we had been in that boat. And all of a sudden, it's like, nope, it's time. And so I can only imagine like when he called home to his dad to say like, we're coming home to farm, because his dad had asked him several times, like many times, and to come home and farm. And it's just never the right time. And this was the right time. So I knew I was leaving corporate. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work for myself. And I knew that the rules were going to change. And it was my turn to support my husband with his career. And so we packed up and moved back. Our son was in 4th grade at the time. And he started, my husband started farming. We got my son settled in school. And then I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. And somebody reached out on LinkedIn and said, why don't you become a financial advisor? And I thought, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. I remember in the 7th grade, I rented books on mutual funds and I was reading about it. Like that's not normal behavior. So I'm like, yes, this seed has been planted in me for a long time and it is time for me to be a financial advisor. And so I ended up joining a firm that was captive, which it is a certain particular scenario where I could only write business with them, but I learned a lot there. And I worked with a lot of farm families. And a couple, 2 or 3 years into the process of being a financial advisor, I'm working with all these farm families and I'm really loving them because it's who I am and who I relate to. And I'm finding that they are really struggling with farm succession planning. And while our scenario, I mean, it was not perfect because nothing's ever perfect, but it was really, really good, like really good. And they were not experiencing that. And I'm like, there's a way to make this work. Like there's a way for this to happen so that there doesn't have to be so much family angst. And, I would see farms go up for auction because it's a forced auction and nobody expected it, but there it happened. Right. And so I thought I'm going to get good at this. I'm going to get really good at this. And so I started doing a workshop. I did it 22 times the first year. It was rough. God bless the people that came to it because that was not what it is today. But I started sharing information. Yeah. And I was a speaker by nature. I always have been. And so I just shared this I ended up meeting a couple attorneys. One of them in particular was amazing. She let me sit in on all these appointments. I learned everything she knew about farm succession planning. She actually had her family lose their farm when she was a child. And so that left an impression on her. And so I spent hours with her in appointments. I've worked with a couple farm mediators who taught me like what to do when it really gets really bad, right? And so with all of this journey, I just got better and better and better at farm succession planning and better at speaking and better at serving people. And eventually that's all I was doing was farm succession planning. And I love it, very passionate about it. But I was finding like communication's the key, right? And the more ways that we can communicate with people in a kind, gentle way so that they're receptive, the better off it can be. And from that came the book. I'm like, I'm going to write a book with a little bit of humor. This doesn't have to be so heavy. And when we connect the dots in the right way, it goes very, very smoothly. And my whole foundation of farm succession planning is based on honoring the farm and honoring the family. And I think people go into it with a lot of perceptions that like you only think about the farm or you only think about the family and the spouses are pointing fingers at each other. And when I can work with two people, usually a mom and a dad, a couple, and I can get to the basis of it, they both think they're both very important. They just have to have a platform to be able to share how to honor both of them and move forward in the right way. So, yeah. So there's the book. That's how the book happened.
You know, you always know, like I said, when somebody's gone to this extent,
Yeah.
they're that passionate and there's a backstory, right? You don't just all of a sudden write a book. That's a big project.
Right.
What were you saying it took you like 7 months to write it?
Yeah. I interviewed 100 farm wives. So I belong to this Farm Wives Facebook group who's that's fantastic. And I started and there's a couple other groups too that I belong to and some girls that I went to college with and, just the whole gamut, but reaching out to farm wives and saying like, I just want to talk to you. I want to know how it's going for you. Tell me about your family. And I interviewed 100 farm wives. And my only regret on that was I wish I would have taken better notes or recorded it because I got so into their stories and learning from them and hearing their stories that I think I could have had an amazing more detail on that, but it was an amazing experience. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. And I share that passion and that why behind it as well with our show.
Yeah.
That's really transition planning is why I started this show 7 years ago. And then I went pretty hard on it and then left it and then have done it over the years. And now it's like, let's rock and roll, guys.
Let's do it. Yep.
Before when we were chit-chatting, you guys in the audience, we know as farmers, we have a lot for us and against us. I mean, with prices and inputs and competitors and crazy markets, like there's a lot. We don't need to be our own worst enemy when it comes to passing on the farm, right? So I'm really diving in. And as I was saying to you, I did a search on Amazon again. I'm like, there's gotta be somebody writing books. And sure enough, finally I found this and I loved it. Yeah, it's great. Okay. Why don't you talk a little bit about the book? Because I think the way you did it is so clever. There's a lot of books, like business books that are dry. And you know what? When you can't be engaged in a book, it's hard to take in the information. And this packs a punch, but yet it was like so fun to read. So can you talk about the parable style and introduce us to the little characters in here? I love it.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I don't know how all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to do a parable. Like it just came to me. And so I like the idea because I used wolves and I used wolves in the parable because they're pack, like they're families, right? And they stick together. And so I'm like, that's like people, like we stick together. They're like that. They stick together. They have packs. And so I decided to write a parable about wolves. And so these wolves farm, which is kind of funny, right? And I go through the story of mom and dad wolf. And of course, there's a son that decides he's going to come home and farm. And then the other pups aren't happy. And so we can kind of go through that storyline through the wolves. And we can have a little bit of humor in it once in a while to make it a little more lighthearted. But yet it's like, ooh, that's true, right? Like that's true. Like there's a part where the pigs show up and they're judging the pigs, or they're at a church like meeting in the basement. It's all the women down there doing whatever, right? And there's Fancy Wolf that shows up and everybody's like annoyed by Fancy Wolf and why does she look like that? And she spends so much money. And then they get to know Fancy Wolf and she has the same trouble as everybody else with firm succession planning. And it's just the whole story, of just how we're humans, right? And we have human natures and we go through life. And so I'm hoping like a person can read about the wolves and say, okay, that's cute and funny, but like there's some reality in that. Like there is some reality in the fact that one child might be farming, the other children are very jealous because they don't know what's going on. And they, and they maybe will speak up about it and maybe they won't. And if we read a story about wolves going through that, it's a little like, it can be a little humorous when we think of it as ourselves. Ooh, like that's hard, right? Like that hurts a little bit. And so to kind of show those stories a little bit with the wolves, I think just makes it a good talking point, to be able to share and explore. So yeah, so it goes through a parable, a little bit of a story, and then it tells some facts, and then there's some action steps. And so that's how each chapter is made up. And so with the whole story of the parable is they decide they need to do something and they go find a guru who helps them, and they decide then they know they need a whole team, and then in the end they communicate. And so it truly goes through the process that I have found works for families, to do farm succession planning, because it's so much more than just going to see an attorney. So the parable goes through that, but it's in bite-sized pieces. So you can take it and read it. Then you read the facts about maybe wills and trusts or fair and equal or whatever it happens to be. And then there's an action step. And so, yeah, that's how it's made up a little bit. So
I love it. So Heather, I love how you said that the parable, it makes it easy. And like I said, you can just sit and read through this in one night, in a few sittings, really, if you do. It's so fast and compelling. But I like how you said that there's some serious stuff. It's all very serious. But what I really love about this, and we're going to talk about it right away, the farm family dynamics, by putting it in a parable, it's an easy way to maybe make a poke or make a point, because there are a lot of dynamics in transition succession planning that are pure human. I think a lot of this, and years ago when I started covering these episodes, I got quite frustrated because I can clearly see that a lot of the issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm curious what you think, probably according to this book, I think a lot of the issues on succession planning is the humanness at the beginning, the fear, the roles, the avoidance. I think once farm families can get over that and acknowledge that, the rest becomes easy. And in your book, you really just name it. And it's so easy to take and not be defensive as a farm mom or Fancy Wolf or the dad. You read it and you go, oh, point delivered, but I'm not insulted, right?
Yeah. Thank you. I was hoping to do that. That's exactly what I was hoping to do. So
you totally did. And actually, honestly, Heather, after reading your book, you've now given me full courage and permission to start talking about these human elements. I've been hinting at them and trying to get that out of my guests, but I'm fairly new on the block. So I'm like, maybe it's just me. And I'm just thinking it's the communication, the upfront stuff. But when I read here and picking a few other brains, I'm like, this stuff, the human element, is the sauce, the magic sauce that we need to get through to move this along. So I'm so happy that you just named it and packed a punch with a friendly character.
Good. Yeah. And once we get the communication rolling, the rest is just a process. Like that's just process. It's just getting that communication going, and having some honest discussions about it. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go into this. And now that you've given me full courage and permission, and knowing that I'm not the only one that thinks this way, let's talk about farm family dynamics.
Okay.
Because the point, and I want everybody to get this book, but I want to talk about it here. I see a conflict of desire in dad because it's his role, his legacy. it's hard to move through a lot of that. When you're the main farmer, you love it, you don't want to give it up. Is it easy to stick your head in the sand, head out the door anytime the subject comes up? Because, well, you want your kids to continue on, but
Yeah.
you're human, right? And then mom's
Right.
sitting here going, we can't ignore this because the
Right.
family's being torn apart. So can you talk about dad, mom, and then how you say that women tend to take a lead? Do you want to just
Yeah.
roll on that?
Yeah, for sure. So I've done a ton of studying. And when I tell you this, you guys are gonna be like, oh yeah, totally. So men tend, right? Like not every 100%, men tend to think about things differently than women. And I have when I do my workshop, I have a little chart I put up sometimes. And I think of like my husband, if he's going out to maybe I don't know, whatever, plant corn, right? Like he's going to go out and plant corn. And I could say to him, we need to talk about farm succession planning. And he'd be like, okay. And the second he's out the door, he's thinking about planting corn. And that farm succession planning's never coming back, right? Like he can shut it off. It's a beautiful gift that he can shut it off, but he is in one part at a time, right? And even if we're sitting and eating dinner, he's thinking about eating dinner. If I start talking about farm succession planning, that he wants to talk about the steak and the dinner, right? Like he's eating. That's what he doesn't even want to talk at all. He just wants to eat. So, it's very much men think in boxes. And it's a gift because they can shut things off. They can concentrate on one thing very, very well and do a very, very good job at it. Now, women, on the other hand, we have a freeway in our head and everything is going 100 miles an hour and it never stops. Now, that's a gift to us because we have a lot of things to take care of. We tend to be the ones that are nurturing the children. So we're probably raising the children, getting one child to school, cooking, probably have a career on top of it, might be helping on the farm. I always say by the time I get to the end of my driveway, I've probably thought about what my mother needs, what I need to take to potluck at school, what needs to happen next week, and if I'm going to be able to go see my girlfriend later, right? Like to go hang out. Like it's just like all of that's going all of the time. And then we get that farm succession planning in there, and then we're thinking about that. And so we can't shut it off. If it gets in our minds, it doesn't shut off. We can think about something. If we have a sick child, we think about it 24/7. Farm succession planning can be that way too. Like we just can't shut it off. Now, that's a gift too, because we can't shut it off. Like we need to keep moving forward. And that's why so often we're the ones that are saying, we got to think about it. We got to do something. We got to think about it. And it was kind of interesting. I had a workshop out in a rural area, and this couple, just this dear couple, they're in their very late 70s, came in, and I don't often do ads in the newspaper. For whatever reason I did. And there was a little ad in the newspaper, and they came in with this ad, and they're like, we didn't RSVP, but can we sit in? I said, absolutely. We're just having pizza at Pete's Ranch. Come on in. So they came, I said, you're glad you're here. And they came in to talk about farm succession planning at this workshop. And she told a story. She goes, well, he made a joke, something about this piece of paper keeps showing up, right? This little ad. And so she had been doing it for 4 days. So he would sit in his chair and there would be the ad, right? And then he would go out and work and he would come back for lunch and she would sit the ad there. She just neatly put that ad beside him every day for a couple days. And then all of a sudden he's like, I guess we're going to this today, right? Because that's how they communicated. I mean, what a nice way to be able to say, like, think about this, but yet not having any conflict, right? They had each other figured out after all those years of marriage. And all she wanted was for him to come in and start working on it. And all he needed was a door open to be able to do it. And it worked out great. And we were able to get a plan in place for them very easily. And once I sat down with him to really hear what he had it was interesting. He had some interesting concerns about family dynamics. And he came in and said, like, I respect this next generation coming on. Like they've got some skills. I've got some respect for them, but I got some fears too. And he didn't label it that, but that's what it was. And like, once we got that, like, and she just said, I just want it done. Like, it just needs to be done because the kids are fighting and, we just need to get it done. And he needed to just get over like what those fears were. And they were legitimate, but they were easily addressed. I just need to know what they were. And then we can get it all pulled together, go see an attorney, get it written up, and we were in good shape. And so was a long story about family dynamics and how we communicate. And we need to get the ball rolling and start talking. And so, people will come in, and I'll tell you a little bit about my process, because I think
Please.
that will help, especially the beginning of it, on how to start. Like, there's all these preconceived notions, and especially after we've been married a really long time. And, often, not always, but often the men, they've been farming and they're worried about that, and they know the logistics, and they know every inch of that farm better than anybody in the whole entire world, right? They've done everything they can for it. There's been good years, and there's been really, really rough years, and they've been there, and much respect, right? Much respect. And then there's the wives, and they have been raising the kids. And the thing is, dad loves the kids and mom respects and loves the farm. It's just a perception. It really is. And if we can say, look, we're not judging. We're not judging. We're not going to have to prioritize. We're not prioritizing at all. All we're going to do is figure out strengths and weaknesses, what they want to have happen, and then we're going to move through a process. And a lot of times that process is going to take us through fair and equal. And people don't know solutions.
Right.
Like, they don't know. They don't know. If people come to me and they're like, fair and equal is my biggest concern. I want my son to continue farming. And I say it, and a lot of time, and because it's an elephant in the room that nobody wants to say. If we split that farm up 4 ways because you have 4 kids, or even 2 ways because you have 2 kids, it's probably not going to continue. Like, we cannot split a farm up evenly in almost every situation and have one kid continue to farm and the other one's not farm, and have everybody own equal in the end. The math doesn't work out, especially with the price of land nowadays, how we have to be more competitive as farms get bigger. Like, we cannot chop farms up and still keep going. It just doesn't work. We got to keep that farm whole, and we got to keep the family whole, because that family is our backbone, right? Like, that is what's important too. And so if somebody comes in and they're like, fair and equal is our thing, like, we can't chop this up, but yet and mom always says, I love the kids. Like, that's what moms say to me. I love my kids. I want my kids to feel loved. I don't want my children to feel unloved when we die. Like, that's the crux of it. And I'm like, yeah, I can probably come up with 10 ways to solve fair and equal. And people normally need 1 or 2, right? And there is some fast, easy ways that we can do it. And then there's other ways that are over time. But the sooner we start it, the more leverage I have, the more leverage I can find to make it work out in the long run. But we have an honest discussion about fair and equal. Like, if the farm's worth 10 million and there's 2 kids, both aren't getting 5 million. Like, it just doesn't usually work out that way. And so we talk through it. And once we can really get that stuff, out and talk about it. And so often it's been buried so deep for so long, like, it's really that elephant in the room. And if we can just talk about it and know, like, there's solutions. And then, so when I work with people, we get to that point, we talk through it. And then my job's to come back with suggestions and ideas. And then we spend some time working through the suggestions and ideas and thinking about it. Like, let's not rush it. Take a couple weeks, think about it. And then we can look at implementation. And then they go on to an attorney to get it legally written up. And so that's the process. It's good. Yeah. So I do a lot of joint field work with other advisors, and they bring their clients. I'll do the farm succession part, and I enjoy that. But the advisors start getting a little antsy because it takes a little longer to do farm succession planning. And I've just learned, like, we just have to take it slow and get through the process. And it's absolutely worth it in the long run, because we end up in a really good place where the family is happy and the farm has got a good solid plan, and everybody's been communicated to in the right time. And as I was reviewing, all the interviews you've done on farm succession planning, and how fascinating. And I bet if you laid them beside each other, like, we would all have our own ideas of how it should happen, and the best ideas, and what works. And I think the families that are drawn to me are the ones that align with how I believe the process should work. And I believe very strongly about my process, because I think it eliminates drama. Like, I want the least unhappiness possible. Like, I don't think there's ever a reason to sit down and, like, duke out anything over any of it. Like, whether your spouses or with your kids or between children, like, we don't need any conflict. we just need to get through it, have good communication, and communicate at the right time. I think that that's super important. And so part of the communication, I always say, like, mom and dad come in and meet with me. And a lot of times it's the older kids, right? Like 40s, maybe even, they'll like get mom and dad to come in. Well, God bless them, right? Whatever it takes to get mom and dad in, like, let's get them in here and let's start the communication. But I always say the kids can come for that first meeting. It's just going to be education. I'm not going to ask what the parents want to have happen. I'm not going to ask any details about money. I'm not asking anything, because at the end of the day, I need to meet with the decision makers, who is almost always mom and dad. Now, once in a while, it's two brothers or something like that. But usually it's mom and dad. And that's who I need to sit and talk to. And they need to be able to talk openly without worrying what one of the kids is thinking or the other kid is thinking. Like, and they are the decision makers, right? They are the decision makers. And I tell them, I want you to be 100% empowered to make the decisions, because the more decisions you make now, the better off it is in the long run. Like, whatever we can make now, and the less we punt to our kids, the more likely they are to get along after we pass away. And that's what we want. We want our kids to get along with each other. We want our grandkids to be raised as cousins. And if we punt a bunch of issues to them and we're like, you know what, I'm not going to make the decision. They can figure it out after I pass away, which unfortunately that gets said. You're just causing an unhappy family. You are not taking responsibility for what you've got in front of you. You need to make the decisions, make the choices, get it written up, and then move forward. Now, a lot of times, and I even used to in the beginning tell people, go ask your kids what they think. I don't do it anymore. Here's the thing. You're going to go to one of the kids and say, maybe the son has been farming for years. He's on the farm. And so you go ask your daughter what she wants. You know what she's going to say? Mom and dad, I love you. You raised me well. I don't expect any inheritance. I don't expect anything. But is that true? No. I mean, that daughter's not going to tell you, you know what? Well, I know what that farm's worth and I want half of it. And if you've got that daughter, which sometimes we might, like, that's not good either. So I say, make the decisions, get it written up, and then talk to the kids about what it is. Now, if we don't tell the kids in the end, which happens too, like, that's just causing the issues to continue if they don't know what's in there. So, here's a couple examples. One of them I think of, it was a daughter that had been away in the military, and dad had been farming by himself, and there were two other children, adult children, all of them. And the daughter came home and started farming with dad, and brand new out of the military. Like, we don't know where this is going. We're new, but they had the worst holiday of their life. And that mom came into my office just bawling. And she's like, I just don't know. My kids have never fought. And I said, well, we need to get the farm thing figured out. It might change because we know the kid just came home. Like, but she's like, I don't know. I don't think that's it. And we're all like, yeah, that's it. And so if they would have went through the planning process, which they did, and then they didn't communicate it with the other kids, it did no good. Like, you're still going to have the angst. But we needed to get it written up and say, okay, this is the plan now. It might change, but right now, this is what our plan is if we pass away. And then it's off the table. We don't have to worry about it. But if we put it in a file and we put it away and we tell them, like, you'll find out when I die, that's not good either, because then they're still fighting. And if that was me, and I'm 40 or 50 years old and I'm farming, and my dad told me, look, it's on the shelf, you'll figure out when I die, there's no way I would farm. There's no way I would get into that business agreement. If you're getting into a business agreement, you have every right to know what the plan is, whether it's farming or anything else, right? And so it works the same. And so, yeah, it's sad. You see kids, adult children love the farm, and they stick it out in hopes that they get what they can get to continue. And that doesn't always happen either. So it's got to be good communication on all sides. And there's a right time to communicate all of it. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because I've been reading books about transition planning, and there was another book that said you start by sitting the kids down and asking them what they want. And I'm a business person. I've been involved in sales. I'm like, that is asking to take a can opener, open the can of worms with no control. Like, get a plan. When you said that, I said brilliant, because it's weird, because then the blind's leading the blind, in my opinion. Why of course, either the kids aren't going to tell you the truth or they'll be like, I expect equal. And then
Yep.
what do you say? I mean,
Then what?
that's not the way you approach it. It's like, okay,
Yep.
I guess because I'm a business person, right?
Right.
You do all your
Right.
research, you get ready, and you go into the meeting with a
Yep.
plan and
Yep.
present versus, yeah, I guess I'm a salesperson, right? So I know that you go with a
Right.
plan for
Right.
everybody.
Based on facts.
Yeah.
Facts and not feelings. Yeah.
Instead of just opening it up to opinions and feelings. And
Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate it. And you know what? Quite frankly, I appreciate this frank conversation with you. And I'm going to ask you questions like this. And
Yeah.
I hope you have some time for me. I'm also going to go back about the mom dynamic because all these things that people would consider small, I think these little nuances
Yeah. Yeah.
are the what are they? They're the pieces that cause people fear or cause people
Right.
not to start, right?
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I would
yeah.
be sitting there, I could see founders being like, okay, I know we need to do this, but I don't have the knowledge and I don't know what to say to the kids and I'm too busy
Right.
to go find out. So you just get caught chasing your tail.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So I like that you say that. Like, it's your farm. And I fully believe nobody's entitled to anything. And
Right.
that drives me bananas, that entitlement. Whatever
Yep.
happens, happens. But it's their farm. They need to have a plan.
Yep.
They need to think it out, research it, and then approach the children with a plan, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And I always tell them when we get started, I'm like, we're going to get this done and it's going to be a while. But when it's done in the next 3 months, 4 months, I'll sit down with your kids and I'll go through everything. I'll tell them all of it. If you don't want to, I'll be there. I'll do it. We'll do it together. And never have they ever taken me up on it. Because
Okay.
by the time they get to the end of it, they're like, oh yeah, we feel good about this. It makes sense. I understand it. I can communicate it. We don't need you, Heather. We got it. And they always do. 100% of the time, they feel so confident in it and they feel good about it that it's a non-issue anymore, even though it's the biggest issue when they walk in the door. Yeah.
That is great. I wouldn't have expected you to say that. I thought a few people would want you to be the messenger to deliver it. Oh,
Nope.
Good.
It's always good by the end. And
okay, go ahead.
the other thing you had mentioned about, business, it's a business. Farming's a business, and it isn't like it used to be where we had these small family farms. Like, it is big business.
Wow.
And decisions were made by making good business decisions. Otherwise, farms aren't here anymore. I mean, any farm that's still here, it's because somebody behind it's entrepreneurial farming genius that is running a really, really good farm. And so it's that we tap into to make the good decisions. It's a business decision, and we keep the family important too, but a lot of it, we got to put that business hat on for. So,
okay. Do you want to keep on going or can I hop in with a question? You were doing a great job on your process.
Hop in. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me hear it.
I want to go back because then I'm going to ask you again to kind of walk through your process, but I want to jump back. Here's the uncomfortable conversations that I want to have on behalf of this industry. So let's just do it. We'll pretend we're the wolves in here and then we'll make it comfortable. So
sounds good.
In there, you said dad thinks in boxes, and very often because I can feel this inside. I'm a business owner. I have that masculine drive, that build.
Yeah.
So just the mere dynamics of it. When you have somebody coming up to replace you, somebody's coming up to replace you. That's uncomfortable. We deal with the humanness. You find your meaning. I have meaning in my business.
Yeah.
Founders have meaning in that farm. So what happens to them? Where do they go? All the feeling stuff, let alone the I don't know what to do in the income. So I'm going to say, and looking at a lot of different farm families and different things, there's some avoidance on behalf of dad. And I'm not going to blame them. We're human, right?
Right.
So dad goes into farming box or whatever box in the mine, does his thing. Mom's like, no, I love the farm. but I love the
Right.
children. We got to deal with this. Mom has her
Yeah.
15-lane freeway going on here.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on. So the one thing that I liked that you said, and we're going to get stereotypical here when I'm saying it's
Okay.
dad farming, I think I'm going to guess, and if this doesn't apply to you, that's okay. Just we carry on. I'm going to go stereotypical in a lot of the farms that we're talking about transition.
Yep.
Dad's the farmer, mom does her thing, but dad's the farmer.
Right. Yep.
We'll go with that scenario. So mom cares about the kids. She wants the plan to happen. And you said in your book, 9 times out of 10, I think is what you said, it's mom that spearheads this. Because here's what I'm thinking, and I'm naming all the uncomfortable stuff. And if I get hate mail, that's okay, because I'm doing this for our industry. If mom doesn't want to make the move, because maybe that's not her role, she's not comfortable, let's go with this. If she doesn't do it, dad's going to avoid it. Family's going to suffer. So I love that you said 9 times out of 10, it's mom. And in that part, I feel there's permission for a woman that's reading this that might be like, oh, my husband is avoiding this. He's not going to deal with this. Do I need to deal with this? So do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And I totally find it to be true in my practice, right? I mean, if nothing else, I find it absolutely to be true in my practice. And it's the women that are making the appointments. They're the ones that are getting the husbands in. And so then the question is like, how do we do that? If we're a woman and we haven't ever had that role where we step up and say, look, we got to get something done, because we've always done the non-business stuff and he's always done the business stuff. Like, how do we do that? And it kind of too is the same process a little bit if it's like the adult children that are maybe home farming, maybe not, and mom and dad aren't doing anything. And they care about the farm, they love the farm, they love the family. It's always, I cannot think of a single case where it did not come from absolute love of the family and the farm, right? Like, it is an agreed thing when people work with me. That's not the people drawn to me. It is just a love for what we've built. Whether it be the values of farming or the farm itself or the family. And so it's similar to that if it's a younger generation or it's the wife. And I had done a 3-hour masterclass, and it was all women on there, and we got to talking, and it was interesting because we went through and we talked about, what do you say? Like, what do you say? And from it, I wrote a script, and I'll make sure and get it available to you, and you can attach it to this podcast, but it's called the No Drama Script. Like, no drama. Like, we're not going to have drama. We're just going to have a discussion. And it gets down to the detail of like things we don't think about when we're in it, right? Like, when you're not in it, you're like, oh, of course, Heather. But when you're in that moment and you've been the one not speaking up always, right? And you've always ran the family and not the farm. And all of a sudden you're like, gosh, this seems like a mountain I have to climb. Like, let's break it down. And if we can write it out and think about it and what we're going to say and how we're going to say it, it's a world of difference, right? And so it goes all the way into like when and how do I approach this? What do I say to let them know we're going to have this conversation, right? Like, we're going to do this conversation. And let them know it's coming, so they're not doing 25 things at one time, or we're not trying to catch them as they're going out the door. Like, we get something on the schedule to have the conversation. And then if it's the next generation, I say approach it like a business, like approach it like, a business. If you're married, like, it's still a business, like approach it from a business aspect. If that's what your partner understands, like, we need to talk about it from this standpoint. And then it just goes through things to say, how to lay out what's important and why, very factual. When I coach it, I usually let's not talk about a lot of feelings like that. Let's just talk about the facts, right? Yeah. Like, we can talk about feelings later, because I'm a big feeling person, but like, let's just talk about the facts and let the feelings go aside, because we can handle the facts. And so, I still say it sometimes, like, if you sit down and you do this script with your husband or your dad or whoever it happens to be, and you don't get a budge, it's surprising. Once in a while, you don't get a budge. set the appointment and come in.
Mm.
Let them know. I set an appointment for next Tuesday with Heather. She's going to be on our computer screen and we're going to talk about this. I'd love for you to show up, but if you don't, so be it. I'm having the conversation. They'll show up. They'll show up because they know they need to be in that conversation. Very, very rarely will they not. Now, does that feel a little aggressive? Maybe, but does it need to happen? Yeah. Is it difficult? No, you set an appointment, have me show up on your computer screen, right? The other thing that works well is I do a lot of virtual workshops. I've got it's even recorded on YouTube. Put it in the computer, show it, they're sitting down at night, put it on the TV, have them watch it. And it's very process based. It's a little bit about communication, but get the information in front of them, drip it out there a little bit. And then when you make the decision and set the appointment, but they'll come, it'll happen. So
Heather, I am so thankful I found you. You're my soul sister. Because I look at this industry from a varied background. I come from sales, marketing. I own my own media company. I'm partners with my husband. I'm a certain personality. So I have often said that we need a script for this because in sales, you learn scripts and it sounds manipulative, but it's not. It's because when these moments mean a lot to us and we're nervous and we're in our emotions, if you don't say things in a certain way, you're going to get a certain reaction, right? Because if we come at our husband, our wife with a lot of emotion, or we catch them off guard, we're going to get a certain reaction, which isn't positive. And well, a farm wife, farm mom, farm lady out there might be like, that is manipulative. It is not. It's just giving us some words to say that will lead to the proper conversation. And I love this. And I've been watching this industry and knowing personality types, knowing couple dynamics, like some are equal, some have the traditional roles, some have equal say, some don't. And I'm like, what a incredible tornado of variables that make this so challenging. And by having this conversation, I want to be clear because I don't want to appear to be pro-woman or pro-feminist. I am pro people being empowered to have the right conversations so that the right results happen. So everybody ends up with the result they want. The farm continues on. You know what I mean? So I'm not like, go woman, go power. It's let's give everybody the tools and ideas and concepts so that we can actually move. Because truthfully, I am so very scared about our family farms that we have right now. With everything else going on, if we don't plan properly and we say, oh, the kids can deal with it after, that's going to be an estate sale, an auction, and there goes another farm. So anyway, sorry, that was my rant.
Common sense, there's no common sense to the laws. And I think, each generation's been raised a little different, has different resources. And so our generation Googles a lot, and we're open-minded and we know, and we understand the laws. The older generation, it was different. You owned your farm and you told how it was going to be and that was it. Well, when you pass away, common sense goes out the window. And if you don't have a legal document, that's going to be split evenly amongst your heirs. There's no way around it. And you can't split a cow in 3 ways. And so, or land, you can't, they're not going to bother to sit down and decide what acre is worth more than other acres. They're going to say, sell it all and divide it. They're going to mess with it. And it goes through probate and it gets really ugly. And so I hope that, our generation has got our hands on it a little better, but I don't know. But it's the battle we're battling now is the older generation. And the fact that they didn't have the knowledge, it didn't move at the same pace that things move now. Everybody didn't know everybody's business like they do now. And so they're scared. And if we can just get them in and start a conversation, that's what we need to do, and the stories, I love what I do because the other day, even it wasn't that long ago, a son called me and he's like, well, my dad's going to call you and here's the story. And I know you can't tell me anything, but this is what I need you to do. And I just listened. Right. And so then I go listen to dad and and he needs to do the planning and he doesn't want anybody to know about it. And that's fine. Like, as long as we're making progress, it's all good. Right. And so, whatever needs to happen just to get the decision makers to start moving forward, that's what we need to do. So,
Yeah. And oh, Heather, you just hit every dynamic. It's perfect. I'm glad you're saying it because I
yeah,
don't think everybody sees it. I've had my family ripped apart by lack of
yeah,
transition planning. And then I go, okay, well, that was my grandpa. That's a different generation. They didn't really
right,
even know these concepts. We forgive.
right.
Let's carry on. But here we know better. And
We know
most
better.
importantly, I'm having these hard, awkward conversations, pulling the band-aid off, addressing power roles, these kind of things,
Right.
because I also think that we need the knowledge not to be greedy and entitled and be aggressive with our parents, but if we can have the information and kindly, if
Right.
they want to and they're open, guide them, or else I just think people are going to spin forever and get nowhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You got to get in front of the right people. And I don't think our industry's always done a great job at that. I mean, there's not a lot of people that do what I do. Like,
Right.
I'm not sure I know anybody that does exactly what I do. Um, and there's attorneys that are very good at their part, but they don't, I always talk about, and in the book, it's in there, you need a three-legged stool. And if you're not getting through the process and you're trying, it's because you have a weak leg on your stool. And on that stool is a good attorney who understands farm succession planning. Now, more and more attorneys are saying, look, I don't understand, you need to go to a specialist. But when I first started about 9 years ago, people were going to the attorney on Main Streets trying to get someone out of jail in the morning and do a divorce in the afternoon and thinks they're going to figure out your trust. They're just not, like, they just can't do it. Right. And so more and more they realize that, but you got to go to a specialist that understands farms, that's an attorney that can do your trust work or whatever it is that you end up landing on. Most of the time it's that. And then you need a good CPA that's long-sighted and not just short-sighted. And I call my CPA a lot. I lean on my CPAs a lot with my farm families. They have a lot of knowledge. They're the ones that are going to keep the IRS out of our business. And there are things we can put in our trusts and wills, and there are things that we can do that are legal, and there's things that we can't do. And so we need to link them in. The other thing about a good CPA is a lot of times they're our first line of defense when it comes to farm succession planning, because you already got the relationship. And I think if we could get more CPAs very educated on what to do, give them options, like who you send people to for farm succession planning, we would do better. But a lot of times that's who people go to. Like, they go to their CPA because it's like, well, maybe they can help because they're smart and they know my books, right? And that's usually if you got a good one, it's a good place to start because they're going to get you connected in the right place. And then you need a guide. So when I do presentations with my attorney that I work with a lot, she'll introduce me as the quarterback of the team. And even when she brings someone new onto my case, so quarterback of the team, I'm like, I'll take it, because I'm the one that will call the plays, make sure everybody's connected. I spend time getting through that communication stuff that nobody else is going to do. Your CPA doesn't have time or know how to do that. Your attorney's not going to do that. That's my role. And then I have things that I can do to help, like fair and equal. I've got levers I can pull, long-term care coverage. Like, what are we going to do about that? We can get that fixed. Then when you go and see your attorney, and if you see a good attorney, they're going to say, how are you going to deal with fair and equal? How are you going to deal with nursing home care? You've been to me, or somebody like me, then you go to them and they write it up. And I don't write wills and trusts up. So we don't compete with each other. I had somebody oh my gosh, I thought his wife was going to kill him. They came into my office, and I always get the good stuff. Really, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun around here. But they come in, and I know the CPA is a very good CPA,
Okay.
and one of the best. Sends them in. So I'm talking to them, and the mom and dad, they know they need to do planning, but they're just like at this part where they just aren't getting anywhere. And he goes, well, I just want to, and he's like, I want to know what you suggest. And I could tell he was staying at a distance, right? Like, staying at a distance. And he's like, well, I'm just going to stick to my CPA. I'm going to go back to them and they'll help me. And I said, I'll see you in a week. And he goes, what? I said, I'll see you back in a week. I said, he can't do what I do, and I can't do what he does. I'll see you back. And he laughed, and it was enough humor to break it. And he's like, yeah, okay, you're right. I get it now. Like, I get it. We need all of you guys. Like, and so, or I was at a workshop, they had hired me to come out and do a workshop on the other side of the state. And I spoke with the family and then I followed up a little bit later and I was out there visiting and, she comes up to me after my workshop. She's like, you're telling me I need somebody different on my team. I said, yeah, you got a wobbly stool. Like we need to fix it. And if it's that easy, if it's easy enough just to find the right people on your team and know that's all I got to do is get a good team. That's all I got to do. And the rest is going to fall into place. That's possible. Like, don't get in our heads about decision making or what happened to our kids in the 6th grade or how hard we had to work to save the farm in the 80s. Like we get all this stuff in our heads and we're worried about all this stuff. Think about get the right team. I don't have to make any decisions. I just got to get the right team. And then we're going to move through the process. So,
You even use the same wording that I used with another guest that was on the show. I said, I think of somebody like you as the coach of a team.
Yeah.
Because the lawyer, the accountant, they know their positions on a football team, right? Let's pretend they don't know the plays. And see, even conversations like this, where we're just talking about this, I don't even think a lot of farmers know who to go to because wouldn't they just go to the accountant? And that's great. And hopefully the accountant knows enough. But if you go to the wrong accountant that doesn't have a big picture, they could be like, here's a good tax plan. And then it's not the best plan, right? So
and it's not written up legally. Like the CPA can't write it up. So yeah.
Right. Good point. I love that you use that analogy. And again, the little coach, what do I see? A squirrel with his little helmet on?
Yeah. The guru. He's a squirrel running all over the place.
Yeah, it was good.
It probably feels like that sometimes, so.
I imagine it does. Okay, that is excellent. We have weaved our way through a beautiful conversation, and I love that it has just flowed naturally. So a lot of what I wanted to cover with this conversation was a lot of those farm family dynamics, addressing the female element. We've talked a little bit about the process, a little bit about fair and equal. A few other things that I have, and I'll kind of list them, and then you can take it where you want.
Okay.
I had the 4 big obstacles and concerns that farmers had. Working to a plan, when to bring the kids in, which you addressed, and maybe steps of the process, and then really just talking about the book and everything that's in it. I'd love for you to do a call out because it literally is, I would say, okay, mom, dad, anybody on the farm, you're thinking about the process, grab this book and you're going to feel much better and have a stronger understanding when you're done. So take that where you want to, the obstacles, goals, and then the book.
Yeah. The out of all the farm families and I mean, so much in common, right? Like all of us really do. Came from agriculture, love the family, love the farm. That's what makes us America great. That's what makes us all great. Like I really honor them. And there's, at the end of the day, like it seems super complicated. There's 4 things. There's 4 things that kind of get us hooked up. The fair and equal, like how are we ever going to divide this out and keep going? And sometimes maybe even somebody's not even farming, but yet we want to make sure it stays whole, or we want to make sure that the family keeps the asset and the wealth. About 50% of people that come to me are going to continue farming and about 50% are not. So it's a 50-50. So, and I honor both of them.
Wow.
How to pay for nursing home care. Boy, it's like $12,000 a month now. It's brutal. Nobody wants to go to a care center. Nobody does, but you know what? They're full and we don't always have a choice. So we can't stick our heads in the sand. There's 3 ways to pay for it. There's not just one, there's 3 ways to pay for it. And so my job and your financial advisor's job is to figure out how you're going to pay for it. Like that's our job. So now, not when you need it.
I'm putting my hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You said 12,000. Do you mean 1,200 a month? 1,200 or 12,000?
12,000 a month is what my clients are paying.
That is highway robbery.
Consistently. Yeah. Yeah. We could do a whole thing on it. It used to be so that we're farmers, we know everything's driven by regulations. Nursing home is driven by regulation. I used to work in home care before I came into the industry. I mean, it was a path laid, right? I mean, 17 years in human services is what I did. So I understand the regulations as a licensed administrator. So yeah, the costs are getting driven up, and a lot of people are private paying or self-paying in the assisted living regulation and not going to a nursing home. It's making it very expensive, but it's better care. So, but 12,000 a month is, and even all the Alzheimer's, 12,000 a month. So yeah, that's what we
Sorry to
plan on.
interrupt. I had to.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
That doesn't
So that's
even. Yeah, that doesn't
it's
even
crazy.
seem right. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's
Carry
number
on.
2. And then logistics, like just logistically, how are we going to do this? And then the communication. So those, we talked about those, like,
Yes.
it's just a process step by step. I think the like warnings I want to give, or things that like other advisors maybe don't always talk about, or they might tell you something different. And so I was at the other day at a women's conference of ag women. So it was, I loved it. I was at home there, and we were talking, and I was sharing, and it was great because it was a small group and we could all share. And I was supposed to be the presenter. I was, but like, it was just a lot of interaction. It was very nice. And someone said, I went to a presentation 2 months ago, and it was absolute opposite of what you just told me. And I'm like, I appreciate you saying that. And I said, take a deep breath and sit back and figure out what's right for your family and your farm. And the kicker of the thing was, if you like to read case law, which I like to read case law, one of the most litigated things, one of the most litigated things in the United States right now is business entities. And so if you think you're doing your family a favor by keeping it as a corporation and having your children own shares, and maybe the farming child owns 60% and the non-farming children own 40%, that is a highly litigated situation, because you are causing business partnerships from people that don't want to be business partners. And a perfect case to read and study is in 2014 in the state of Nebraska. There was 2 boys that owned 80% of the shares, and the girls got the rest, so 20%, and they went on farming. It was a very nice farm. The boys ended up paying themselves, and again, they're probably in their 60s by this time. Mom and dad had passed away. They paid themselves in commodities of about $400,000, didn't pay the girls anything. Girls got mad, legaled up, and sued the boys. That's what we want to avoid. And if we choose to use business entity to pass our farm on, a lot of the times it really opens us up for litigation, because we have relationships forced. And I've seen it with stepmoms and kids. It's punting it forward. And so usually we are a business entity. When we pass away, it drops into a trust. The trust is carried out and probably goes into another trust. A trust is and we could do a whole nother hour about this. Maybe we should sometime, but the trust is what's going to protect it from divorce, which we need to talk about. It's going to protect it from all the other things, right? And so nobody ever really owns the farm. It's in the trust, and that's what protects it. It has to be what's going to happen if we want to avoid litigation, losing half the farm because of a divorce, all of those things. It's a simple process. It works. You just have to have the right people on your team. And so I have to say that, because I know there's people out there telling us, go ahead and have a corporation and split it between your kids. Such a bad deal. Such a bad deal. That's what our generation is going to screw up. People are going to do that because they're being told to do it, and it's not going to work.
I'm hearing that. And I said, you know what? I've had business partners and they were amazing.
Yep.
But I still don't want business partners. I couldn't imagine. I love my sisters, but I couldn't imagine being forced to be in business with family, but also family that doesn't farm and doesn't understand and doesn't care. And they probably also just want their share in money and not shares in farms. So to me, it seemed like a clever answer putting it in a corporation, but I'm like, And I think
it's
you
not good.
Wrote that in your book. And I'm like, clever. Thank you for sharing that here. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's an important one. And so I think that's the biggest thing. It's just to start get the right team and start the conversation. So
yeah. Well, and that's exactly you sit down, let's say mom and dad, they come to you, and then you can really sift through all the dynamics and the desires, right? Because let's say you have two brothers or a brother and sister farming together, whatever, gender aside. You have two siblings, they both farm, and putting them in a corporation together might make sense because they both have same end goal versus farming siblings and non-farming.
Right. It might. I had a family I worked with, and it was a dairy farm, a $40 million dairy farm. It was very nice, and they had job descriptions. They had ways family members came in to the farm. They had ways they would take family members out of the farm, not the family, but the farm, if they were not producing at the level of work that they thought they should be. It was 8 actually, because it was 4 siblings and then their spouses. And so all 8 were employed by the farm. But it was all laid out. I mean, they had titles and policies, absolutely made sense, but that's not the average farm.
No,
that's not what most of us have. So
clever. You know, this whole episode has been brilliant, touching on just all those hard points and just getting to the truth. I like that. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.
I'm trying to think where else I love the best conversations that always ends up going down rabbit trails in a different order. So you covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover and more. Just, I would say you touched on what's in here. Fair and equal, your farm team.
Yeah.
North Star, having your goal. I would recommend just go buy it, guys. It's great. You'll feel literally, if you're sitting there spinning your wheels or you think you have a good idea, read through it and you'll be like, oh, that's not too bad. And it's a good starting point. So then you'll know what's in the book, right? Yeah.
And I'll get you a couple handouts we'll attach to the podcast. I'll put I have a cell phone number on there. Text me if anybody has any questions or needs anything. You can sure text me there. That's what I'm here for. I feel like I'm very lucky that I've been given the skills that I have through my business journey, and then financial advisory, and then my good experience with the family and everybody that's come in into my path. I just feel really blessed to have been down this path, and it's my job to serve and help other farm families. And sometimes just a quick conversation can answer a lot of questions and get people going in the right direction. And so I don't want people to sit and suffer like that. That's not the answer. You shouldn't have to think about it for more than a few minutes. Like, give me a call. We'll have a conversation and get things going for sure. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love it. I think that wraps up the words of wisdom right there too. So any closing comments? And if somebody wants to connect with you, buy your book, we'll put links in, but best place to buy the book, is that Amazon or?
Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon. Yeah.
Perfect. Oh. Good. Then we will include all the notes in the show episode notes. Cool. Heather, I'm sitting here going, I have a list of 14 subtopics on transition planning that I want to cover. I'm like, ooh, Heather.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
I won't call you 14 times for 14 episodes, but I sure would. I love the wisdom that you have and your willingness to talk about what I think is the hardest stuff, the stuff up front here, and getting the ball rolling, and then going from there, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly right. Take action. That's
okay.
That's one thing. So,
well, thank you. Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate you spending your time with myself and the audience.
Yeah.
So
thank you. So,
you are welcome.
Good.
You guys in the audience, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, like it, share it, get it out there. Honestly, every farm family needs to hear this, and go buy this. It's a great read. You'll enjoy it. You'll learn a lot. So thank you guys. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.